CEO's shocking bag search of a single dad reveals incredible truth that left everyone speechless. Jake stood in the bare, fluorescent-lit break room, clutching his worn messenger bag, heart racing with a combination of dread and determination. Today was the day a promotion he had sacrificed sleepless nights and weekends for was finally within reach. His mind raced as the clock ticked down, each second echoing the weight of his responsibilities. Lily's laughter played in his head, her little voice believing he could conquer the world. Yet here he was, a single father drowning in student loans and bills, wondering if he would ever rise above the tide. Suddenly, Mr. Collins entered. The imposing CEO had a reputation for strict compliance, and the usual buzz in the room turned into a hush as he scanned the employees with a narrowed gaze. The air turned thick, charged with an unspoken fear. Jake felt tiny under his scrutiny, anxiety rippling through his body. Today's discussions about innovative strategies and growth could reshape not only his career but the future he dreamt of for Lily. But what if he failed? What if Mr. Collins decided to pull the rug out right beneath him? As the CEO commanded everyone to place their bags on the table for random checks, Jake winced. The weight of his bag felt heavier, the rough fabric digging into his fingers as he reluctantly placed it down. Did he really need to face this humiliation in front of his peers? Their laughter and camaraderie seemingly untainted by the struggles of life hovered like a distant dream. Jake shifted his weight, imagining the disbelief on Lily's face if he didn't come home with good news. Before he could take a breath, Mr. Collins began rummaging through the bag. Papers slid out his presentation, a folded crumpled letter from Lily tucked in amidst the chaos. It felt like a trap that spiraled into view. The moment froze as Jake's heart raced. The letter held her childish script, capturing her hopes: a bestest house full of laughter where Dad wouldn't just survive but thrive, where he would make her proud. The letter, laden with innocence, a stark contrast to the rigid corporate world crumbling around him. Jake's mind churned frantically. What if Collins read it? The CEO's expression gave nothing away, yet Jake's stomach churned with nausea. The disdain in the room felt palpable, a swarm circling. And there, the silent monsters of doubt dove into his consciousness, questions swirling like relentless currents. What would they think? That all his hard work was for the sake of a child's naive dream? Was that enough? Before they could continue, a brief voice interrupted Jake's spiraling thoughts. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the facade of professionalism crumbling, Jake grappled with the rising terror of failure. He fought for composure, determined to hold on for Lily, for their future. As Mr. Collins paused, looking up from the letter, something unexplainable shifted in the room. The air thickened, pregnant with unvoiced emotions. Jake stood transfixed, the moment hanging in balance, knowing the very essence of their shared humanity lay exposed. Would this unexpected connection shatter the walls that divided them, or would it solidify their roles? In that charged silence, Jake felt the impending storm of uncertainty brewing. Would he grasp this chance to rise out of the shadows, or would he watch another door close, leaving only murmurs of lost potential behind? The tension begged for resolution, but the outcome remained painfully elusive, leaving Jake straddling a tightrope of trade-offs, dreams, and the reality of an unforgiving world. Mr. Collins broke the silence first, his gaze piercing. What do you call a city with no children? A wasteland. The room held its breath as his pronounced tone turned inward, his eyes resting on Jake. Mr. Ellis, would you care to explain this? Jake's heart thundered in his chest, a mix of embarrassment and fear. It's a note from my daughter, sir, he managed to croak out, his voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the room shifted, morphing into something more complicated, a cocktail of intrigue and disbelief. I see. You're balancing personal and professional life. Colin's voice, once a mechanism of authority, softened marginally. But it's always an uphill battle, asn't it? Jake felt the weight of the gaze shift, the eyes of his colleagues now reflecting curiosity rather than judgment. They were no longer mere spectators to an embarrassing display, they were witnesses to an invocation of vulnerability rarely seen in the sterile atmosphere of corporate excellence. "Every day," Jake replied, the tremor in his voice betraying the resolve he wanted to project. Yet despite the sting of fear, he felt embers of strength heating within. This was a reminder of the authenticity that drove him, a right he didn't need to hold back. It's about finding balance. I wanted to stay true, to show her I can provide, that I'm more than just a paycheck. Mr. Collins leaned back slightly, his posture indicating a new level of contemplation. Do you think you can sell that vision to your team? Can they trust that you are the one to lead them to higher ground? Jake's pulse quickened. The opportunity rippled in the air, every word, every decision could shape not just his future but the entire fabric of the team. He thought of the late nights, the endless work meetings that blurred into personal lives. It was never just about numbers or quarterly profits, it was about the human experience behind it all. It's not easy. They see the numbers, the bottom line, Jake said, his voice gaining strength. But beneath those figures, we're all tied to something bigger, our families, our dreams. I want my team to feel that. Just as urgency filled the space, a flicker of understanding appeared in Colin's expression. For the first time, Jake could see the man behind the executive facade, someone who valued genuine connection over mere transactional relationships. Good. Because leadership is about more than authority. It's about nurturing the trust among your team, Colin stated, his eyes locking onto Jake's. Prepare your presentation with that in mind. I expect more than just numbers. The weight hadn't lifted, but it transformed. Jake conducted a mental reassessment of his vision, an expectant flutter building within him. He couldn't just lean on technical aspects, he needed to weave in the emotional truths he discovered in this moment, both for himself and those who had once seemed so distant. As he prepared to exit the room, Jake indulged in a glimmer of hope, watching as his colleagues exchanged looks of newfound respect. Maybe, just maybe, he could redefine himself not just as a corporate cog but as a leader in heart. A future loomed ahead, vibrant with potential, yet uncertainty shadowed it. Was he ready to take that plunge and build upon this unexpected synergy? With Lily's dream echoing in his mind, he steeled himself. This wasn't just a fight for a promotion, this was about creating a legacy, intertwining ambition with family, a dance between the personal and professional. Just as he stepped outside the break room, the reality hit him: much darker challenges would lay ahead, and he had the potential to either embrace them or deflect them. What awaited him now was not just the board meeting, but a confrontation with his own readiness to step into a transformative leadership role. And deep within Jake, the question stirred restlessly: could he truly bridge the dissonance between who he was and who he aspired to be? Jake stood in front of the glass-walled conference room, watching the shadows of his colleagues moving in the fluorescent glow. The weight of his recent revelations anchored him in place. They had witnessed a glimpse of who he was beneath the corporate mask, and now, there was a defined expectation pressing against him. His mind raced with thoughts on how to shape the presentation Collins had requested, one that would showcase not just the hard numbers, but the very human stories intertwined with them. As he walked into the room, Jake noted the subtle shift in dynamics. The colleagues who once appeared indifferent now seemed engaged, their expressions tinged with curiosity. Still, a part of him braced for any sign that they might revert to skepticism, questioning his capacity to balance life's demands effectively. He took a deep breath, recalling the warmth of Lily's smile, drawing strength from her unwavering belief in him. "You ready for this, Jake?" Ben, one of the junior analysts, flashed an encouraging grin. His friendly demeanor brought a slight easing of tension, though Jake could feel the weight of his own uncertainty about his ability to meet expectations, both his own and those projected onto him. "Yeah, just hoping to find the right words that resonate," Jake replied, feeling the tremor of confidence and apprehension pulsate within him. He meticulously set up his notes, arranging them with newfound purpose. They weren't just numbers and charts, they were the lifeblood of the people he led, the dreams they all had woven into their roles. As Jake began his presentation, a fire ignited within him. The room silenced, and every eye fixed on him, riveted with intrigue. He unfolded his narrative around the statistics, recounting stories that exemplified the impact their work had on families, the extra hours they put in for their children's future, the dreams they sacrificed to ensure a secure life. Each story was a thread, tightening the tapestry of their shared experiences. The tension shifted palpably as Jake spoke, the atmosphere filling with a mix of empathy and responsibility. He noticed Colin's gaze focused intently on him, recognizing he was not just an observer but an active participant in Jake's journey toward leadership. "Imagine the difference we can make," Jake urged, his voice gaining momentum. "By working together not just as a team chasing numbers, but as people motivated by personal stories and shared goals." His words ignited fervor, heads nodded in agreement, glimmers of recognition shining in their eyes. Yet, as he concluded, a familiar gnawing uncertainty crept back in. Could he maintain this newfound momentum? Would these revelations become stale, or could he cultivate the relationships he was starting to build? Collins rose from his seat, a rare smile breaking across his stern visage. "I appreciate the direction you've taken, Jake. You've shown us that leadership is about connection." The approval felt like a warm blanket, yet an underlying fear lingered. Validation was one thing, but consistency was another challenge entirely. Could he provide this authenticity every day? As soon as the meeting adjourned, Jake felt a rush of accomplishment, but as he walked back to his office, reality tugged at him. Would they hold him to this new standard? What if they expected him to sustain this earnestness in environments where pressure swelled, and time constrained authentic communication? He returned to his desk and sat in contemplation. The storm of doubt swirled within him. It was one thing to express vulnerability, but to continually live in that space, was he ready to embrace that level of professional exposure? As he glanced at the family photo sitting atop his desk, Jake understood there was no turning back now. He was on a precipice, straddling the line between who he was and who he aspired to be. To lead from this place of honesty, he had to rise to the challenge compellingly. There was no manual for this kind of leadership, a blend of personal ethos, professional integrity, and emotional labor. It was setting forth into uncharted territory, fraught with both potential and peril. The question loomed heavily in his mind: would he be prepared for the trials that lay ahead? And with that thought echoing in his consciousness, he felt a renewed sense of urgency. Tomorrow awaited, and so did the risks he would have to confront. Could he truly sustain this newfound vision, or would he falter when facing the gritty realities of the corporate world? As Jake's resolve steeled, he felt the first stirrings of determination mingle with fear. It was time to confront the uncomfortable truth: he was not just defining his own identity as a leader, he was molding the legacy of those who believed in him. Would he embrace the disquieting challenges or retreat into predictability? Jake returned to his office the next morning, an invigorating sense of purpose cross-pollinated with persistence prickling at his spine. As he logged into his email, the adrenaline of yesterday's presentation buzzed softly under his skin, coaxing him onward. There was a palpable shift in the air, as if his colleagues were gauging what he would do next, waiting to see if this newfound authenticity was merely a fleeting moment or a steadfast promise. His first task was to prepare for a feedback session with Collins, aimed at reviewing the impact of his presentation. Jake felt the pressure, a weight pressing against his chest as he wondered if the approving looks from his colleagues had merely been momentary. He envisioned Collins sitting across from him, scrutinizing every detail, and for a fleeting moment, doubt crept back into his mind. What if his vulnerability was perceived as weakness? What if he stumbled over his words or failed to live up to the newfound expectations? Resolute, Jake shook his head as if to dispel the uncertainty. He initiated a personal inquiry into his feelings about taking risks and sharing himself. Diving deep, he navigated through the memories of failed attempts, lessons embedded in each stinging moment, and triumphs that stoked the fires of his ambitions. He aimed to create an agenda that blended the analytical and the personal, setting the tone for an ongoing conversation rather than a one-off performance, a shift he hoped would take root. The very thought ignited a spark within him. It was innovation, a break from the sterile formality that had characterized their past exchanges. As he drafted his thoughts and outlined his points, the door creaked open. Ben stepped in. "You looked fired up after the presentation yesterday. Want to brainstorm together?" Ben's enthusiasm was contagious, and Jake welcomed the camaraderie, an anchor in the unpredictable ocean of leadership. Absolutely, Jake replied, his heart racing at the prospect of collaboration. The two engaged in an animated discussion, focusing on ways to foster a more inclusive culture in forthcoming meetings. Jake began to realize that elevating others could amplify his growth. It could transform ordinary interactions into extraordinary connections. As the meeting with Collins approached, doubt curled back into focus. Would he still be aligned with this new approach when challenged? He recalled Lila's voice, echoing encouragement: "You'll never know your limits unless you push against them." With each breath, he absorbed that wisdom like sustenance. When he finally sat across from Collins, the air simmered with possibility. Collins began by commending him for his authentic leadership style, but there was a sharper edge to his tone. "This isn't a sing-along, Jake. We're running a business." Jake sensed the tension shift toward scrutiny. The challenge wasn't just maintaining effectiveness but navigating the demands of their corporate machinery while remaining true to himself. Jake's heart pounded as he responded, navigating the difficult terrain. Leadership is about connection, yes, but it's also about results. I believe weaving that authenticity into our strategy will serve both our goals and our people. Collins leaned back, studying him keenly. I appreciate your sentiment, but can you prove it? Can metrics support your theories? Jake's mind whirled. He needed a concrete plan, a strategy that bridged human connection and hard data. Could he transform empathy into performative action? Determination surged within him. Let me compile some case studies, he suggested, feeling a rush of inspiration. Real data showing how employee satisfaction correlates with productivity. I'll follow up with key performance indicators, hard evidence. As Collins nodded, a hint of approval flickered across his face, the challenge lighting a fire within Jake. It felt exhilarating, tempting fate on that precipice of professional risk and expertise. What would happen if he could cross that interface, joining genuine leadership with measurable outcomes? The conversation continued, threading its way through strategies, expectations, and an evolving vision of leadership. But while excitement coursed through him, a question nagged at the back of his mind: would he truly be able to pull off this delicate balancing act in the heat of the moment? What would happen if he faltered when the stakes rose higher than ever before? As the meeting wrapped up, Jake felt a potent mixture of exhilaration and fear. The road ahead demanded more than his commitment, it required acute self-awareness and resilience. And just when he thought he'd struck the perfect balance, a notification flashed on his phone, an unexpected email that could potentially challenge everything he'd worked for so far. Had someone questioned his sincerity, or was there another challenge waiting to unfold? Jake stared at the screen, his heart pounding against his ribcage as he read the subject line of the email. The words hung ominously in the air, each letter pressing against his chest like a weight he couldn't shake off. Had someone eavesdropped on his meeting with Collins? Was his authenticity being dissected behind closed doors? The email was from an unnamed sender, demanding an urgent meeting with the executive team to discuss an unexplained deviation in leadership techniques. As he read between the lines, Jake's mind raced. Was this about his recent shift in approach? Had he unintentionally become the subject of scrutiny, undermining his efforts to connect more genuinely with his team? It felt like stepping onto a tightrope stretched too taut over a chasm. Fingers trembling, he typed out a hasty reply stating he was available any time, but that immediate decision brought no comfort. The ground felt unsteady, the once invigorating adrenaline now morphing into an uneasy anxiety. He needed clarity but couldn't afford to drop his guard. Embracing vulnerability meant risking exposure, and now the very foundation he was trying to build seemed threatened. Who is this from? He muttered under his breath, attempting to shake off the rising tide of unease. The day dragged on, each tick of the clock amplifying his trepidation. It was only midday, yet it felt like an entire week had passed since he first saw that email. His mind cycled between counterproductive thoughts whether he should lash out in self-defense or lean fully into the authenticity he was striving so hard to uphold. He leaned back in his chair, glancing at the reflections in the glass windows outside. Just a month ago, this office felt like a cage. Now, it was a battleground for ideas, innovation, and, ultimately, for his own evolving identity. He recalled his conversation with Lila about self-discovery and risk-taking and suddenly felt the fire of determination begin to smolder within him once again. After mentally berating himself for spiraling into negativity, Jake opened his notes. The suggestions he had outlined during his session with Collins suddenly seemed more robust. He realized he could turn this situation into an opportunity. If they want evidence of my approach, I'll provide it, he resolved, confidence flooding back. Starting with the preliminary case studies, he cataloged several instances where companies increased productivity by embracing employee-centered initiatives. The data was irrefutable. It was as if the threat looming above his head transformed into a challenge he could conquer. His pulse quickened as he envisioned how he would present this counter-narrative at the upcoming meeting. Would he weave in stories of how workplace happiness affected tangible results? Or would he focus solely on statistics, treating their concerns like a strict academic equation? As he jotted notes fervently, Jake's phone buzzed again, a text from Ben. "Hey, heard about the meeting. Want to talk strategy?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Yes. Let us meet." That meeting evolved into a strategy session rife with fresh ideas that intertwined authenticity with hard metrics. Together, they crafted a compelling narrative that encompassed personal anecdotes, theoretical backing, and real-world examples. Each layer solidified Jake's resolve and provided a solid foundation for the inevitable confrontation ahead. The more they discussed, the more Jake molded his own perspective. He wouldn't just rely on proving himself, he would assert his beliefs with confidence. The goal wasn't merely to withstand scrutiny but to position himself as an emerging leader who strived to harmonize warm human relations with business acumen. As the hour approached for the unexpected meeting, Jake stood at the edge of his own transformation, one foot in uncertainty but now armed with strategies that reflected both head and heart. Just as he straightened his tie, a final notification pinged on his phone. It was an email update from Collins, sending over additional figures about employee engagement that contradicted his previous findings. Jake felt another wave of anxiety surge through him, but this time it was different. It filled him with a fierce resolve. He could take on the challenge no matter what it entailed. Would the raw authenticity he had begun to embrace survive the pressures of scrutiny, or would it dissipate under the weight of numbers and expectations? One thing was certain, he was about to confront the reality of leadership like never before. Jake entered the conference room, a knot of tension swirling in his stomach. He was outnumbered, flanked by senior executives who seemed to embody the very traditional leadership principles he had started to question. The atmosphere felt charged, and he could almost perceive the skepticism emanating from the corners of the room. This is it, he thought. No turning back now. As the meeting commenced, the unnamed sender from the email leaned forward, a steely gaze assessing him. "Jake," she began. "Your recent shifts in leadership strategy have raised some concerns among the executive team. We need clarity on how this is affecting our bottom line." The words hung heavy, a judgment draped in professional decorum. Jake inhaled deeply, deploying every ounce of training and self-reflection he had gathered. Instead of focusing on the threatening undercurrents of her tone, he seized the moment. "Thank you for inviting me to discuss this," he replied, bearing his conviction now like armor. "I believe that connecting authentically with our teams can drive far more substantial results than traditional methods. Let me show you how." He moved swiftly through his presentation, intertwining heartfelt stories of employee engagement with hard data. The metrics he had gathered with Ben's help danced on the screen beside vivid illustrations of transformed work cultures. Executives began to sit up straighter as the raw correlations began to unfold: less turnover, increased productivity, the emergence of innovative ideas sparked from within teams. But even amidst the rising tide of interest, Jake sensed lingering doubts. One of the senior managers couldn't contain herself any longer. "Are you saying we sacrifice performance for feelings?" she challenged, her brows knitting together. "What's the real cost?" The air thickened with tension. Jake's heart raced. This was the moment he had predicted, one that had promised to ignite fear within him earlier in the day. But instead, he felt clarity. "Not at all," he said, his voice steady. "What I'm proposing is a balance. Studies show that employee satisfaction is linked to higher productivity. Happy employees are more likely to produce and innovate. This is not about sacrificing performance, it's about strengthening the foundation that drives it. The executives exchanged glances, some nodding with cautious agreement, while others remained unconvinced. The room felt suddenly smaller, with the weight of their skepticism palpable. "Let us put it to the test then," Collins interrupted, her reserved demeanor shifting. "If we were to transition towards more experiential leadership models, who would lead these initiatives? More importantly, how will we measure their impact?" Jake's heart skipped a beat. This was not only a challenge but a proposition, a chance to examine his capabilities as a leader in real time. "I'd be willing to pilot this project," he replied, emboldened. "I can outline a plan for implementation that includes feedback mechanisms so the team can see tangible results. If my approach doesn't yield measurable progress in 6 months, I'll concede to the traditional methods." Universally, eyes widened. It was a gamble, an audacious move that could either elevate him or expose him as a failure. His palms glistened as he rolled the dice. But beneath the rising stakes, a flicker of realization ignited within him. This was not merely about proving a point, it was an opportunity for authentic growth that might revitalize the company culture he had always envisioned. As whispers of agreement rippled through the room, Jake caught sight of Collins leaning back with a raised eyebrow, and he sensed a new dynamic forming, one that invited him into a realm of possibilities and deeper connections. Just as the tension began to lighten, a low voice echoed from the end of the table. "What if we fail? What if her fears are valid?" It was Ben's voice flickering through the air, but even as he spoke, Jake could feel a gust of resolve igniting inside him again. "Then we learn. If we don't confront fear with courage, we'll never evolve," Jake affirmed, his voice slicing through the lingering doubts. The stakes had shifted, and so had he. With that, the atmosphere transformed, murmurs of dissent began to dissipate, overtaken by curiosity and intrigue. The moment of truth dawned on him, but what lay ahead was still cloaked in uncertainty. As they delved deeper into logistics, a glint of determination settled within Jake. He could weather the storm, but what radical truth awaited him on the horizon of this untested approach? Would the trials ahead reinforce his leadership or reveal foundational cracks he hadn't yet perceived? The meeting concluded with a tentative sense of agreement. Jake stepped out of the conference room, heart racing but adrenaline surging. Each of his colleagues' expressions lingered in his mind, unsure flickers turning into intrigued whispers. Empowered by the possibility of making a significant change, his pulse steadied, allowing him a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. Back at his desk, he reviewed his notes, transforming the conceptual ideas into actionable steps. He understood that implementation would require not just planning but emotional intelligence. His recently acquired insight into leadership emphasized empathy, a skill he'd been neglecting as he focused primarily on performance metrics. Jake turned towards Ben, who had been his confidant and sounding board throughout this journey. "I think we need to start with a few small workshops," Jake suggested. "Get people talking. Gather feedback early on." Ben nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "That approach could work, but we need to ensure that everyone feels included in the conversation," he replied, his voice steeped in cautious optimism. "We want to avoid any perception that this is merely an initiative by the new guy." The reassurance in Ben's tone lightened the weight of Jake's uncertainty. Connecting with employees would indeed require sensitivity to their thoughts and fears. Could he effectively bridge the gap between management and the team, encouraging open dialogue without causing further trepidation? Jake decided he needed more insights. He spent the next evening reviewing case studies of organizations that had implemented similar experiential leadership shifts. Each story contained bits of encouragement but also highlighted setbacks. Implementing change in a traditional environment often ignited resistance, an enemy he would strategically need to conquer. He started placing calls, reaching out to leaders outside his organization who had undergone similar transformations. Their advice varied but consistently pointed toward fostering a culture of trust. This was key, he knew. If employees could trust their leadership, they would open up, share their insights, and invest themselves in the vision. Within the week, Jake hosted informal discussions around the office, inviting anyone to share their thoughts. He was nervous. This was new territory, and opening the floor to feedback left him exposed in ways he hadn't anticipated. As employees began to share their views, Jake noted their hesitance. Their words were cautious, reflections of the corporate culture that had left them feeling unheard before. He listened intently, nodding and taking notes even when the responses weren't flattering. When one manager suggested that employees were weary of change, Jake felt that pulsing knot of tension return. Change often brings fear, he interjected, his voice calmer than he felt. What if we took this fear and made it the heart of our approach? The room grew quiet, absorbing his words. Some seemed intrigued, others remained skeptical. But in that moment, Jake understood this was not merely about inspiring confidence in others, it was about cultivating it within himself. He had to embody the courage he sought in his team if he wanted them to follow. As the sessions progressed, Jake noticed gradual shifts in the dialogue. Colleagues began revealing their ambitious ideas and innovative approaches, something they hadn't dared to voice before. The process was slow, but beneath the surface, he sensed seeds of trust taking root. With every conversation, his confidence grew, yet doubts flickered at the edges. He was still exposed, still sensitive to the concerns of his peers and their potential for resistance. Each day, he wrestled internally with this reality, facing the pressures from above while nurturing the budding hope from below. As the pilot project's launch drew nearer, Jake stood on the threshold of a pivotal moment. Could this delicate balance of vulnerability and authority yield the culture shift he envisioned? Would his leadership withstand the scrutiny of both executives and employees? Just as he prepared to finalize plans for the first workshop, a text notification jolted him from his thoughts, a message from Collins, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss the initiative's details. Jake's stomach dropped. Did his growing confidence provoke further scrutiny? He took a deep breath, conscious of the road ahead and the challenges yet to unfold. The pressure mounted, demanding his most authentic self. This was more than a test of strategy, it was a defining moment in his quest for leadership. What awaited him in that meeting room? Would it challenge his newfound resolve, or present an opportunity to solidify his vision? Jake arrived at the meeting room early, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a chorus of his anxious thoughts. As he waited for Collins to join him, he replayed each discussion in his mind, dissecting every sentence while his heart raced. What could Collins want to discuss? Was his initiative viewed as a threat rather than a pathway to improve the workplace? The door swung open, and Collins strode in, his expression unreadable. "Jake," he greeted, lingering at the threshold. There was an air of authority that came with the title, and Jake felt the familiar knot of uncertainty tighten in his stomach. "Thanks for meeting with me," Jake said, attempting to project confidence, even as his voice wavered slightly. Collins gestured toward the chair opposite him and took a seat. He leaned back, arms crossed, and Jake sensed the tension rebuilding in the room. "You've been making waves with the workshops and discussions. I want to know your strategy moving forward." Jake swallowed hard, deciding to navigate the conversation with transparency. "My plan is to center employee voices in every step of this initiative. We've been too top-down for too long, and if we want real change, we must foster an environment of trust and participation." Collins regarded him carefully, a tilt of his head indicating he was processing this. "And what if this leads to more dissent than you anticipate? Change can be messy. Are you prepared for pushback from both ends, employees and management?" Jake shifted in his seat as the weight of the question settled. This was a direct confrontation of his foundational fears, but he had to stand his ground. "I expect resistance, but I see it as a necessary part of the growth process. It's about addressing those concerns head-on, not avoiding them." Collins nodded slowly, but Jake could sense skepticism lingering in the air. This wasn't merely a discussion, it felt like an evaluation. Should he push further? "I've seen colleagues begin to open up in the discussions. They're sharing ideas and not just the typical complaints. I believe that momentum can lead to significant, positive transformations." "I do appreciate your enthusiasm," Collins replied, a hint of a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "But do you really think you can change the culture of this company in the few months you've been here?" A bold vision is one thing. Achieving it is another. The challenge hit hard. Jake's heart raced, and he could feel the stakes rising. I know it will take time. Culture change isn't an overnight phenomenon. But it requires consistent effort, and I'm committed to doing the work needed to inspire belief. Confronting Collins was like sparring with a seasoned opponent, and despite the urgency of the conversation, a flicker of determination pulsed within him. He wasn't just fighting for his idea, he was validating his belief in people's capacity to grow, to trust, and to transform. For a brief moment, Collins seemed taken aback, the smirk fading. I see you're serious about this. If you're willing to align with upper management's expectations while pushing those discussions, maybe I can support you. But this isn't just a project, Jake. It's a commitment. Jake nodded, anchoring his thoughts. He felt the weight of that commitment, but he also sensed an opportunity. I welcome that challenge, Collins. It will ensure we're not just implementing changes but fostering a culture where voices matter. I'm ready to take this path, but I'll need your backing. Their eyes locked, and Jake held his breath, realizing this conversation was more momentous than he anticipated. Collins cleared his throat, finally leaning forward. All right then, let us see if you're as good as you claim. We might just turn this around if you can keep proving me wrong. The pressure lifted slightly, but Jake knew the battle was only beginning. As he walked out of the room, he felt renewed confidence swell within him. Yet, the gravity of what lay ahead weighed heavily on his shoulders. What would it take for him to continue proving both Collins and himself wrong? Would the commitment translate into tangible results, or devolve into the mess he feared? The next phase demanded everything he had still. Jake felt an unyielding flame of determination igniting in the pit of his stomach. Jake stepped back to his desk, gathering his thoughts, poised to lay the groundwork for the next chapter of his leadership journey. What unforeseen challenges would emerge now that he accepted a deeper responsibility? The next morning, Jake paced the perimeter of his office, the stakes from his conversation with Collins swirling in his mind like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. His heart thrummed with a mixture of excitement and dread as he stared at the blank notepad on his desk. A new strategy needed to take shape, but where would it begin? He inhaled deeply, reminding himself that clarity often emerged from chaos. The time for hesitation had passed, he had a commitment to fulfill. The workshop discussions had sparked hope, but now they needed to evolve into actionable initiatives. He wanted to pivot from mere conversations to deliverables, tangible changes that would stir engagement rather than complacency among his colleagues. The ringing of his phone startled him from his thoughts. It was Madeline, a fellow coordinator who had volunteered as his ally in this endeavor. Hey Jake, have you thought about incorporating breakout sessions that allow smaller groups to brainstorm ideas? It could lend diverse perspectives and make everyone feel included, she suggested, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. Great idea, Jake responded. A flicker of energy surged through him. He could envision these sessions as vibrant ecosystems for innovation and trust building. But this was merely a stepping stone. He needed to cultivate an atmosphere where all contributions were valued, not just a handful of outspoken employees. As the day progressed, Jake filled his calendar with meetings, reaching out to those he had identified as potential champions of change. In particular, he recognized the need to connect with individuals from different departments, especially those who had remained disengaged in the past. It wouldn't just benefit his goals, it would enrich the company's fabric. The first meeting yielded promising results. A mixed group gathered, hesitant but curious. At first, the awkward silence was deafening as they exchanged glances, unsure how to breach the uncomfortable air. Jake knew flexibility and encouragement were crucial. To get things rolling, why don't we brainstorm a few changes that could make our work lives more fulfilling? He urged. It was an invitation to share power, and slowly, hands began to raise. Ideas cascaded from the group, each one capturing nuances Jake hadn't expected. He felt a rush of excitement. People were starting to own their voices rather than waiting for someone to give them permission to speak. The discussions were lively, but they also posed a challenge to Jake. He needed to address the inevitable pushback that would follow. A knot returned to his stomach when he thought of Collins. He's going to want results, not just chatter, Jake muttered under his breath, a twinge of pressure creeping back in. What if this approach didn't work? Meanwhile, a voice in the back of his mind whispered doubt. Was he merely delaying the impending backlash? That evening, he revisited his original notes and passions, his foundational belief in cultivating connection among colleagues. This had to be his anchor, a steadfast reminder of why he embarked on this path. He was not simply executing policies, he was bridging divisions. The weight of responsibility that came with his role increasingly felt like a double-edged sword. With each session, he feared not measuring up to the expectations set by Collins and, worse, his own. Doubts crept in like shadows, threatening to extinguish that initial flame of determination. Jake realized he had no choice but to lean into discomfort and navigate through it, recalibrating what success meant in his mind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake's resolve solidified against the backdrop of uncertainty. He would embrace the challenges, no matter how daunting they may seem. What transformation lay ahead was still a mystery, but Jake knew he had taken his first crucial steps toward accomplishing something far greater than he had originally imagined. Suddenly, he felt a buzz in his pocket, an email alert. He hesitated before opening it. The subject line read, Collins' feedback. Jake's heart raced. As he clicked it open, what would the response hold? Would it affirm his vision, or spell disaster? Determination clawed at him. He must face whatever it was. After all, the moment of truth had arrived. Jake stood at the front of the conference room, the anticipation hanging thick in the air. The past weeks had transformed him from a hesitant employee into a leader prepared to embrace the complexities of human dynamics within the corporate landscape. He had earned not just the respect of his colleagues but also his own self-respect, rising to meet the challenges with an unexpected resolve. Today, he was ready to present the outcomes of the pilot workshops that had sparked a genuine interest among his peers and challenged the company's status quo. As the meeting commenced, he launched into the results from the engagement sessions, showcasing a blend of qualitative feedback and quantitative metrics. We've seen a 40% increase in employee participation in team initiatives since we began these discussions, he declared, his voice steady. Moreover, satisfaction scores have risen by 30%. People are feeling heard, and that's translating into their daily productivity. These numbers don't lie. A buzz of interest rippled through the room. It was a far cry from weeks prior when skepticism had dominated conversations. Jake had transformed uncertainty into curiosity, and now many of his colleagues were leaning forward, engaging with the data. Collins raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. That's compelling data, Jake. But the real question is, can this momentum be sustained? Are you prepared to institutionalize these changes? Jake inhaled, feeling the weight of Collins' scrutiny. Months ago, he would have succumbed to apprehension, but now he welcomed the challenge. Absolutely. This isn't a fleeting initiative, this is about embedding trust and connection into our culture. I propose creating ongoing councils for feedback, ensuring continuous dialogue between management and employees, he asserted, gesturing emphatically. The executives exchanged impressed glances. Jake looked at his colleagues who had rallied behind him, their faith evident, bolstering his confidence. Let's talk specifics, Collins prompted. What does the next quarter look like in terms of implementation? Jake felt exhilaration rising in him, igniting his spirits. We phase it in. The councils will meet bi-weekly, align initiatives with measurable KPIs, and collectively aim for the next engagement survey right before our next quarterly review. We'll document successes and areas for growth, ensuring every voice remains pivotal to our journey, he articulated, injecting enthusiasm into his vision. As he spoke, a shift of recognition polished the faces of those in the room, the doubts of the past evaporating. They weren't just seeing numbers anymore, they were witnessing the birth of a culture shift that championed accountability and inclusivity. After the presentation, Collins leaned back, an impressive glint of approval sparkling in his eyes. You've presented a strong case. The executive team sees potential here, but it's up to you to foster this environment. If you can keep this energy alive, you'll become a cornerstone of this company. Jake's heart soared. This was validation not just for him but for everything he had fought to champion. He had faced barriers, doubts, and fears, yet now, he stood firmly anchored in his values. However, Jake knew the journey was far from over. He had to navigate the pressures of corporate expectations while nurturing this newly forged dialogue with his team. It wasn't simply about maintaining metrics, it was about creating lasting relationships. As the meeting concluded, a round of applause erupted from his colleagues, and Jake felt a swell of pride bubbling up within him. His achievement was not merely professional but profoundly personal. He was a single father, who had once stood precariously close to relinquishing dreams, now standing proud, a beacon of possibility for his daughter, Lily. In that moment, he felt he had finally begun to mold a legacy for her, one defined by resilience and growth. Walking out of the conference room, Jake took a moment to glance at the framed photo of Lily on his desk, her smile reflecting the pure belief she had in him. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, filled with a deep sense of purpose. The office buzzed with energy as colleagues gathered around him, discussing their eagerness to join the councils and engage further. Jake had not only pivoted his own career, he had connected with others, making space for future leadership that was inclusive and empathetic. As the day waned, Jake realized the narrative had shifted. This endeavor to bridge professional and personal life had not just sculpted his role at work, it reshaped who he considered himself to be, a leader not only of projects but of people, a father teaching his daughter to dream beyond the ordinary. He felt anchored in his position, equipped with the tools to wield influence effectively. He accomplished what he had set out to do, to rise above challenges with grace and assurance, leading with heart. Jake stepped outside into the crisp evening air, the sky painted with hues of gold and red, a symbol of the beauty in challenges transformed into victories. He was ready for what came next, glowing with the solid confidence that comes from proving oneself, from embracing both fear and victory in equal measure. Tomorrow awaited, and he was prepared for it, ready to show the world and, more importantly, Lily, that anything was possible when you believe in yourself and lead from the heart. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire true personal transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support more incredible journeys like Jake's. Comment your reactions and theories about this empowering conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful finale. Don't wait even one more second to be part of this transformative community.